Hello, everyone. So, got a new story. Let's see what's going on. It says here, mm, hidden abusers recognizing the subtle signs of covertly abusive behaviors in relationships. Screaming is not covert. Some forms of blah blah blah. Use insidious, easily overlooked. Yeah. That's what covert means. To covert, blah blah. Have you ever seen the rain that felt like tiptoeing through a field of landmines? I doubt most people have not experienced tiptoeing through a field of landmines, but I get what you're trying to say. Where every step you took, you come to fear or sell, and when you why do people behave like this? Blah blah blah. She had to find yourself questioning your own sanity. Yeah. It's amazing to me how people pretend like they can't just leave a bad relationship. They're just like, oh, sometimes you feel trapped, and sometimes it's just like, and then they're just gaslighting you. It's like you can walk away at any moment. At what point are you going to take personal responsibility? Why is it that you're a victim, but yet you're not also the perpetrator? It doesn't make any sense. You're the one keeping yourself in that situation. If it's bad and you recognize it's bad, why aren't you leaving? Because relationships are voluntary and no one else gets to decide whether or not you can get into a relationship because you have the freedom to do whatever you want. Why is it then someone else's responsibility to save you from your own bad choices? Are you an adult and do you have adult responsibilities, or are you a child and someone else has taken advantage of you and you deserve to be protected like a child? Backdooring your boundaries, violating your boundaries in underhanded ways after repeated requests not to do so. Then they blame you for making them feel bad for asserting your boundaries. I guess, yeah, I can see how that could happen. You set up a boundary, someone else violates that boundary, but usually the reason that you set up the boundary in the first place is because the person that you're setting up the boundary with is prone to violate it or shown behaviors that would show that they would probably violate it. So by setting up the boundary in the first place, you're essentially recognizing that the relationship is going ahead in that direction, but instead of walking away from it, you're giving yourself chances to back down. And the moment you set up a boundary, the other person knows that they can violate it once or twice. They have chances. So most likely you set up a boundary, it's going to be violated. Sorry. Ghosting after a disagreement. Disappearing intentionally to teach you a lesson after a conflict. So the person can't even leave you alone. That's manipulative, right? For them to leave you alone, walk away from the conflict. That's a bad thing because it makes you feel a certain way and it makes you act a certain way. Later, they return when they feel like you've had enough of their absence and are ready to continue without discussing the issue. This is known as resetting the relationship in order to avoid addressing what happened. How does that stop you from addressing it? Invalidating your experience with them. You're too sensitive. It's a classic example, which is also gaslighting. Is it? Are you too sensitive? I mean, it's a possibility. You could be too sensitive. It could be. Or they could be gaslighting you because it's an obvious thing that anyone would be upset about. If it's an obvious thing that anyone would be upset about, you wouldn't be questioning yourself. Right? Using vulnerable information against you. You're just like your mother. especially if she was. Come on now. Come on now. This one is difficult because it could be intentional. It could be people are that shitty that they would do that to you, or because they know that information about you, they are more prone to associate your behavior with that said information. Moving the goalpost. There's always something about you that needs to change before the relationship moves to the next stage. Yeah, I can see that one's negative. They move the post and keep you at arm's length, performing and walking on eggshells with an empty promise. Yeah, but then at that point, just leave the relationship, man. It's the same thing I said before. Just you don't want to do this anymore. It's becoming more of a hindrance than it is an asset. Walk away from it. Like I understand marriages are difficult to get out of, but just boyfriend, girlfriend, like you can leave that. You can leave that. No problem. And even if you're like roommates, you can still leave that relationship. The tenant agreement might be like a legal document that you can't just easily walk away from, but you can end the relationship still because you're going to have to end it anyways. Why pretend that everything is fine until you're in a better situation than to leave? Just end the relationship and then work on leaving the situation. But you have to start somewhere. Is that all of them? Yeah, I guess that's all of it. Huh. Moving goalposts, using vulnerable information, invalidating your experience, ghosting after a disagreement. I mean, backdooring your boundaries, that's setting yourself up for failure right away. By setting up your boundaries, you already know they're going to cross it because they're already prone to crossing it. Ghosting after a disagreement, that's not that big of a deal. That's not that big of a deal. You can always bring it up after the fact. If the person is walking away, is because either they don't want to do something in the moment because they're feeling a certain type of way and they don't want to overreact and do something that they will regret. So they walk away from it. And ghosting you, they're still mad about it. Like they don't want to really talk because if you call them or whatever, you're probably going to want to talk about it and they don't want to talk about it. That's not that big of a deal. Invalidating your experience, just the wording from that already lets me know that it's more likely that you're too sensitive rather than you have a genuine complaint and the person is gaslighting you, because gaslighting is very difficult to do. Like you would have to be able to question your own reality in order for someone to get you to that point. And a lot of things that people are gaslighting you about, you can independently verify. You can independently verify by asking someone else or Googling it or whatever to let you know whether or not this thing is true and that you're right. So it's very difficult for someone to actually gaslight you. Even though it's a frivolous word now that people use all the time, it's a very difficult thing to do. You have to be isolated. You have to have no other recourse to find out whether or not you're being lied to. It's very difficult. So it's more likely that you are being too sensitive. Using vulnerable information against you, that one is iffy. That one is iffy. If the person is legit, because you can tell the difference between someone using this information to screw you over, because the follow-up is going to be like, oh, I don't want to do this or whatever, or they're asking you for something, or they're trying to manipulate someone else by using this information in order for them to do something, and you'll know it by the follow-up. But if they're saying it in the heat of the moment to hurt you, it's probably not that they're using the vulnerable information against you, is that they know the information and they're reacting based on it. Moving the goalpost, yeah, that one is just a classic. You're not the person that they want, and they're just trying to make you into that person. So you're better off just leaving the relationship at that point. But anyways, interesting situations there. But until next time.